Hello, Puri. Good evening.
Good evening.
So right now we are at a school, and my students are. I have around 15 students, and there are around 5 other participants that will log it in. Yeah, so we can start at maybe 7:02 or 7:03. Yeah, to wait for everything ready.
Thank you.
So Sanchi, do you have my questions? I just give you 2 questions this afternoon.
Yes.
Okay.
I've shared those questions with Mr. Puri, and we
Okay.
shall he shall take them up.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
We will start in 1 minute. Okay. We can start this session. Okay. Yeah. So very, very nice to see my friends from India. Let me very proudly introduce firstly my very good friends. We meet each once in last time in Dubai, Sanchi, and also very, very good friends from our member firm association, Vidur, Puri. Yeah, I'm very happy that today is our first session that introduce how we can do in business in India. Yeah, firstly, I am Professor Huang, that in associate with Wetec CPA firm, and that firm is a member to the Morrison Global Association, and your firm as a VP is also a member firm to the Morrison Global. So that's the reason we can have a good connection with each other. And today, the world is changing. Yeah, because the trade conflict between USA and China has changed a lot of things, and also the pandemic, and also the climate change changed a lot of the things. And we see the trend that the US trade policy is going to replace China with India as their electronic manufacturing base. We see the trend. So a lot of Taiwanese OEM companies are setting up some bases in India. And also I've heard a very important news that the US Trade Representative Catherine Tai is right now, just right now, in India, in New Delhi. They are discussing with your government for reducing the tariff applied to the electronics. So we can see that in the future, maybe in the coming years, the Apple's iPhones will be produced in India. So that would bring a lot of good opportunities. So that what we want to know today, and how we can build up our connections and know better about our future partners, our future business partners. So today is only a start. We want to build up a session, always sharing information with our friends. So today, let's welcome Vidur Puri and Mr. Vidur Puri and Mr. Sachin for today's sharing. So let's applause. So thank you. And you may start with the wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, and good evening, everyone. Sachin, would you like to speak something before I take over?
Sure. So, good evening to all. I understand that it is past 7 p.m. your local time, and to join in to attend a webinar on doing business in India at 7 p.m. local time means a lot. So thank you to all participants who have logged in. And thank you to Stephen for taking this forward. So sometime back, Stephen and I had decided that we must do something together. And we had numerous calls. And then we finally zeroed down on this series of webinar of doing business in India, which would help local Taiwanese companies to understand how they can set their shop up in India. So thank you, Stephen. And with this, I would now request my senior partner and colleague in the firm, Vidur Puri, to take this forward.
Thank you so much, Sachin, and good evening to all. I see from the weather chart that I think it is raining in Taipei and Taiwan, wherever you would be in part of Taiwan, and it's getting colder here in Delhi. But on that nice note, the whole idea, as Sachin rightly mentioned and Stephen mentioned, it is a knowledge sharing and a knowledge base that we will be having and sharing our information that we carry to everybody. So whatever we have compiled would be based on the information which is available in the public domain. And I will take you through the entire presentation, giving an idea about what it is, what to expect from a company or a country outside India to come and set up shop. Stephen, can you see my screen now?
Yes, very clear.
Thank you. So what I would be covering now in the next 30 minutes to 40 minutes will be covering more in terms of what India is, why to invest in India, which are the sectors in India which are booming and which are growth oriented. If a company wants to set up business in India, what are the options available? How can a foreign direct investment be done in India? What are the legal entities? And as Stephen mentioned about how India is looking into the electronic industry, a brief about how electronic industries and how some of the companies already from Taiwan have already set up shop, as we talked about Apple. When I take you through my presentation, I will really touch upon that those entities which have done some sort of a business or set up in India. To repeat, these are all public information which is available and the facts are coming out from that. We are presenting something that is knowledge-based, and any interpretation or clarification, I may just add, should be done only with professional advice. So please take this on this way forward when we look into the entire presentation. So why invest in India? We hear sitting outside from India in Taiwan about India as a country which is the largest democracy. It's always talked about as a country which is large in population, possibly only after China. But there are many other opportunities which come our way because of the population that we have. It also gives a possibility of growth, and how it is being a democratic country. There are various advantages. So I will just talk about why India. So as we say, India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. The other economies may work at a space where Moody's in 2022 had given a GDP growth of 9.6%. These ratios may have changed because of COVID, but still India is in the growth path, and in the next couple of decades to come, there is only one way, which is way up. Because of the India being attractive, India has attracted foreign direct, FDI stands for foreign direct investments, any fund which is coming from outside, of almost US billion, 6.2 in April, which is much higher than what came in April 20. I think it may not be the right benchmark because April 20, India and the world was grappling with the new COVID. So there was not much of a movement. But as soon as things normalized, things are looking up better, investments have started flowing in. One important part, if you see this in the first part of my slide, is this new culture of startups. Interestingly, India has around 16 in the last 3 months startups which are unicorns. And some of the unicorns you may not be familiar, but I will just name a few. Something like a Flipkart. Flipkart is similar to Amazon. So it's an Indian-grown entity which does what Amazon does in terms of goods and services. Then there is Razorpay, which is similar to, or Paytm, which is similar to a payment gateway. So these are some of the companies which have come up in India and emerged as the unicorns. So that talks about our economy, which is growing. What about our infrastructure? Now, India is a large country. So to cover the entire space, what we need to do is to develop infrastructure, and that's how the government is giving a thrust of increasing the infrastructure. And we have currently around 7,000 projects which are running. And these projects are approximately $12.3 million per project. Then there are sectors which are energy, roads, urban and railways, which amount to around 70% plus of our infrastructure. And these are the investments which are coming in because we need to build our roads. Energy is a big block which is there because India requires a lot of electricity, and energy is one of the areas that is being required to be generated. What about our governing structure? India, as I mentioned, is governed as a democracy. So we are truly a democratic country where every person has a right to speech and also a right to do business the way it is done within the four corners of the law. Interestingly, because it is a democratic country, we also have financial institutions which are independent, and the governance structure would cover any company which comes in. So whether it's the federal bank, which is called the Reserve Bank of India, or this Securities Exchange Board, which looks into the stock exchange, or the Competition Commission. So these are some of the ideas which are independent financial institutions if a person sets up a business in India. Then there are favorable policies because India has a hunger to grow. It is welcoming foreign investors to coming in, and because it is welcoming in, there are various subsidies, incentives and policies that the government has flown for the manufacturing companies to set up base in India. I would pause here for a second and say that India over the last couple of years has grown dramatically and known in the world for its IT or services. There are companies which have done extremely well, and India is known as the back office of the various companies in the world. This is the image which India is trying to change further. It is encouraging investments for manufacturing hubs to come in and set up. While I take you through the slides, I will tell you how the incentives have come in and how it's going to be helpful for companies which set up a business or manufacturing units in India. Now, these numbers in the last column that I have is in global index. I know India, when we say in terms of global innovation index or the last in terms of world ease of doing business in India 2020, we don't form in the top rank of ease of doing business in India because it's a bit complicated. But what we must see the positive side is that since 2014 and 2019, India has really jumped 79 positions, which means there is an eagerness to improve and to make things easier for people to do business in India. As I said, we may not be in the top 10 of doing business and ease to business in India, but wherever there is a difficulty, there is also an opportunity to learn and to do more business in India. India ranks number 1 in the Central Southern Asian region in terms of world's intellectual property organization, because that's where our expertise lies, as I said. Now, what are the booming sectors in India? We've tried to cover a few sectors which are really doing well and would continue to do well. There are many sectors which will come in and many sectors will go out. As I mentioned in my previous slide, that the unicorns which I've set up, there are 16 unicorns, and I gave the name of a few. These are some of them which are fintech and financial services related. Somewhere where there is technology, somewhere where there is the finance. So payment gateways have done well. I gave you 2 examples. So India has the highest fintech adoption rate global of 87%, which is really significantly higher than the global average. Growth year to year, if we see last year, there has been an 18% increase in this sector. 29% is the highest expected rate of interest on fintech projects globally. And we've done well in India. And 22% of the CAGR of fintech market size is expected in 2025, which is the other attractive, which I think maybe countries like Taiwan would be interested to have business exploitation in India, would be the electronic systems. India is one of the largest consumer. We must know it's a consumer, whether it's the mobile, whether it's the electronic systems, one of the largest in Asia Pacific market, which has a 118 billion Indian electronic market. It contributes to approximately 2.7% of the entire GDP of the country. We export approximately 11.7 billion and generate approximately 13 million direct and indirect employment in electronic systems. Aviation. I think the way that the population is and the way that the sectors have moved on, India is the 5th largest market in terms of the aircraft passengers. It has grown 11% as a traffic, and we have foreign tourists which are approximately 16% which come and go. Interestingly, I've not put it in this, that 14.4% of the domestic aircraft is the travel which is done domestically. Now, India recently in the last 2 months, I will just change here, has opened up aviation, and what has happened is that we had an airlines which has been the government-run airlines has been taken up by one of the largest private sector, which is the Tatas. So that has been taken over by one of the private sectors. So India has opened up its aviation in aircraft. There is a new airline which is coming in, which is expected to come in the next 6 months. It's been done by a small startup, and it's going to be coming in. As we have East West, you would have heard of East West in the US. It's one of the most profit-making companies in the world. As an airline, normally airlines don't make money. We have another airline called Indigo, which makes money here. So airlines is seen as a preferred destination, and there's a lot of churning which is coming in. So that's one sector which we see in India as a boom sector coming in soon, with so much of change coming in. Automobile again is India's the largest vehicle market because of the population that we have and because of the people. Now there is a shift from a general automobile, whether it's diesel or petrol, to electronics, EV. So there is always a change, there is always a movement, and India is looking into that. So India has approximately 35 million people who are employed in the automobile industry, and it has 7.1% share in the India's GDP. 40% is the share in the global R&D, because that's where research and development takes place in the automobile sector. So these are some of the sectors which we thought are booming. There are others which are metal and mining. India is the second largest producer of steel globally. It has a foreign direct investment of 17.69 billion, which is in the metallurgic industry and mining in April 2000 to March 2021 in the years. That's the foreign direct investment inflow in this industry. India has 300 metric tons of domestic steel production capacity, which is to be done till 2030. In 2020, India has a 99.6 metric ton as the second largest crude steel producer in the world, as I mentioned. All these sources that I'm talking about has been derived from a public information, which is investindia.government.in. So that information is coming out from a government or a public domain information. Renewable energy. I think this is the talk everywhere in the world. India is lagging behind in renewable energy at the moment. If you see August 21, we have only 100 gigawatt of installed renewable energy. But going forward, what India would like to do is to have 1,000 gigawatts of renewable energy potential in India. That is the potential that we have. It cannot happen overnight. 2030, 2040, 2070, there are certain commitments by the Prime Minister, and India is looking to have renewable energy to go on with this carbon credits, which one can have and reduce the carbon dioxide emission. So we have approximately 22% share installed capacity. We have increased by 243%, which is very small, because if you see 100 gigawatts, it's really small. But there is a baby steps taken in the last 8 years, and it have increased 243% from where we were. But the path is going forward. Why renewable energy is also important is when a renewable energy is set up, it also is set up with other components which come part of the whole structure. So that's one area which would be a dream project or a dream line of a sector in India which is booming. IT and business process management, which is the BPM. This goes without saying that India has always, in the last 30 years or 20 years, has gained in this IT infrastructure. India has 8% of the share in India's GDP is from IT and BPM. 55% of the share in global outsourcing market. I think that's a huge number. That's a huge number because 55% of the market worldwide looks to India in terms of outsourcing, in terms of business process outsourcing or IT. So that's where our economy has taken a leapfrog in terms of what India was maybe 70 years ago as purely agriculture, which we still are agriculture because of the land that we have. But IT and business process management has taken a leap in a different ball game altogether. We foresee in these new booming industries, the color and the shape of Indian business will change for the years to come when we look at renewable energy, when we look at IT, when we look at automobile, or we now look at telecom. India has the second largest mobile network. I mean, that's something to talk about again because of the number, share, volume that we have. I remember that 30 years ago, when I personally visited Singapore, that at that time I was really fascinated to see people talking on a wireless or a mobile. And I said, when will India have that technology when a person will be able to use a mobile phone, or what is a mobile phone? And today I'm proud to say that every person in India, every second person when you look at, has a mobile phone, and that's the market that one has. So when Stefan mentioned about Apple wanting to manufacture in India, I may just add to the participants here that we already have a Taiwanese company called the Foxconn, which is based out of Taiwan, and they've set up a unit in India, in south of India, which is providing these parts to Apple and to the mobile industry. So we already have people or the companies in India looking into this. And what are we looking at telecom? We're looking at building 100 smart cities employment of approximately 4 million. The smartphone subscription is 620 million plus. That's a huge number, and see the incentive that is possible in terms of this industry. So in the last 10 minutes, what I've done is to give you a complete flavor about the kind of industries that are booming in, what the future could be, and where one could look at the possibilities of growth in the Indian market and the business. To move further, now if a company wants to come or a country wants to knock at the doors of Indian market, how would a foreign investors come into India? So this slide gives you a very brief picture about the various investment options. Some of them may not be applicable to general part of it, but generally for a foreign investor could be, I will just, here we go. So we could have the investment options of, when I look at options of an investment of a non-resident Indian, that is also an option which may not be important when we discuss today. But there are many Indians who have gone out of India, settled in the various countries outside India, and they could come into India and invest. Not a part of our discussion today, but there are investment options available for coming as a company, whether in the stock exchange, which is a listed stock exchange, or unlisted. When it's unlisted, there will be a foreign, you'll hear this word called FDI, which is the foreign direct investment. That's the route which is available, which a company can come into India as a foreign, or when it's a listed entity, then there is foreign venture capital investment. This is pure investment purposes in terms of share or equity. There could be foreign portfolio investments, again looking at the stock exchange, ADRs and GDRs, and there are vehicles which are investment vehicles called the REITs and investments or alternate investment funds. These are the investment options. But if we look at a brick and mortar kind of an investment, then how does a foreign direct investment come in, which is where a company would like to set up base in India and come into India and invest. These are the options. So India has been a very closed economy over the period of time, because I'll just go back and mention that when we got our independence in 1967, we were growing as a socialist economy, where we wanted to protect the local growth, and there was a lot of shift in terms of the government putting in the money and not opening up the economy to have the economy in a few hands of people. That's why I would say it was more like a socialist economy when we started in 1947. That was when we got independence from the British. Now, over the period of time, when it was in 1992, when the economy started opening up, we started opening up doors for foreign investments and privatization. And now, when we sit in 2021, the foreign investments are welcome with open hands, and these are the various routes which are available. So earlier there were permissions which were required, and there were government approvals. Now we have 100% permitted through automatic route in some. So there are various sectors which have the government has given that they could be an automatic, and there are few prohibited. So let's go in the prohibited sectors first. So what is not permitted in India for foreign investments in India is if you want to do lottery business or gambling, whether it's online or it's private lotteries. That is not permitted in India. Subject to certain permissions like defense, etc., majority of them are now welcome in terms of investments in India. So if we rule this out, what is permitted automatically is that if you want to set up, a non-resident can set up and invest in India, whether it's real estate, whether it's software, whether it's manufacturing, or a single brand retail. This single brand retail would mean that you will have to have an entity which will set up as a brand and can sell in India. Real estate would be more like a township development. It cannot be just that you buy, somebody comes and sets up business to buy just land and start trading in land. That's not permissible, but a real estate development is permissible. It is also with the prior investment, what is available under 100% through government route, where you need to take a prior approval from government. Could be in the areas like satellite, mining, scientific areas, because these are defense and these are sensitive areas. So the government may permit, but after going through the entire application. So that's a direct investment which is also permissible, subject to certain limitation. Some of the areas, again, in the similar lines where there is 100% permitted, but again through a government and automatic route, it would mean that certain percentages are permitted, whether it's defense, insurance, aviation, and telecom. But there has to be a government approval, or there are limits which are prescribed. It need not be 100, it could be lesser under the automatic route. Once one decides that these are the sectors, how does one come and set up office in India? So legal entity in India, interestingly, is not limited to only a foreign company setting up a subsidiary in India, but there are 3 or 4 ways that a foreign company can come in. A foreign company in its own capacity, not as a subsidiary or as an Indian company, can open a liaison office, which would mean that it can, in its own name, set up a small office, but this has very limited permission. So if a company from Taiwan wants to see what India is all about, it can set up a liaison office, which is permitted under the Reserve Bank of India or the federal regulations, where it can only be permitted to make expenditure, look at the market, explore, but do not carry out any business in India, because it's restricted to have a look to the Indian business environment. So that's the liaison office. The other entity could be a branch office, wherein a company which wants to do business in India could import or export from India, set up a branch, it's like an office in India, and carry out those restrictive but business activities. So it cannot manufacture, it can carry out these activities which are related to exports, import of goods or research or even consulting work. Then there could be a project office. This is a specific approval where for a foreign company like a Taiwan, if it gets into a contract with EPC where a company is setting up, an Indian company is setting up a power plant in India, and it needs a technology partner, and the technology comes from Taiwan, and the Taiwan company would need to set up and send some of the people in India and spend 1 year in helping the Indian company set up, then that foreign company can set up a project office for a contract. But this is limited to each contract. Once the contract is over, the office is shut and the money is taken out and sent back to the home country. Then the ones that we discussed about the foreign direct investment, it could come in as an Indian company. It could set up a 100% subsidiary in India, or it could set up a joint venture with an Indian partner. You could have an Indian partner and you could have an overseas partner. Both of them could join and come and join and form a joint venture in India. The last option which is available is a limited liability partnership, which is like a partnership but a limited liability under the Companies Act, and the foreign direct investments is permitted. This is not a preferred route, but there is an option available. Generally, a company which wants to look into in India as a long-term perspective for the next 20, 30 years would look at this entities to set up a business in India like a subsidiary or joint venture. These are short-term entities specifically to specific purposes of whether it's a project or an office or to explore in India. But a long-term vision, you have an Indian company, set up an Indian company, and then you do business in India. Now comes the most important part in terms of when I started my presentation, in terms of how these sectors are booming in India and how the Indian government is really looking at getting investments in India. Because as I mentioned that India was always known as the IT hub when we said that 55% of the world share of business process outsourcing is carried out in India. India wanted to change the perception of inviting manufacturing companies to come to India. What happens when we have a manufacturing company coming into India is very simple in terms of economics. Is when we have a setup of an investment coming into India, what will happen is it will have a direct impact on my growth, on my GDP of the country. It will help employ the local people. It will help the infrastructure to grow, because when an industry is set up, there will be infrastructure in that area which will be built. Once that is built, the smart cities are built, and the India or any specific place grows. So what are the incentives when we're looking at? So these incentives we've tried to cover today in our today's webinar is specifically to, some of them I've covered in terms of the Indian electronic industry, because I think that is something that I believe, and Sachin and I discussed it internally, we believe that Taiwan has got a strong presence in electronics, whether it's the superconductors, whether it's the superchips, whether it's the electronics part of it. That's where the strength lies. And today, we've covered the India electronic market. So what has India done? India has a production-linked incentive. This is where the government has allocated 479 billion, I would say around $6 billion as incentives under the scheme. If you are an entity and you set up in India, now this scheme which I have mentioned is which was come out in year 2019-20 for 5 years. Interestingly, very recently in September 21, the government announced another scheme which is related to this and pushed this. So this pushed this base year to 21, and 5 years now is extended to 25-26. So presently, the last scheme which was available, there were approximately 16 companies which came in and they registered themselves for this incentive. Now, what happens in this incentive? Let's hear. So what are the target segments? The target segments are mobile sectors and electronic components. And what is the incentive given? The incentive is that if you come and invest, even if you may be already in existence in India, manufacturing over the last 5 years, but still, if you are able to invest more and start manufacturing more. So if you manufacture more based on further investment, you will be given an incentive, and that incentive could be around 4 to 6% of the increased sales. So if you have a base year of 2019-20, which is now 2021 in the recent scheme which has also come in, is that over the period of time, if you are able to put in more amount in terms of the manufacturing base, you are able to produce more, the government is going to give you an incentive. So apart from whatever is being made as a profit by the company, the government will give you an incentive. This is what we call as a production linked incentive. So this again was very, very clearly to attract global investments in India. And out of the 16 companies which I remember reading in the news, was one of them was, say, Samsung, because being the manufacturer of mobile phones. So the Korean entity registered under production linked incentive. If I'm not wrong, I think Foxconn also did apply for this, because this scheme closed sometime in the month of March 21. But because each time the scheme will keep opening up, there is an incentive available for specified electronic components. This takes care of the electronic industry in terms of production linked incentive. So as I said, the criteria is incremental investment and sales of manufactured items. So this has to be on the basis of manufacturing volume, which is the other incentive. Then there is a scheme for promotion of manufacturing of electronic components and semiconductors, called the specs. So as we all are aware, in terms of the electronic components are basically the building blocks for any electronic industry. Today, when we looked at automobile as the growth industry, in an automobile industry also we have the electronic components to be part of it, whether it's the GPS, whether it's the electronic part which is to be used. So every business that we're looking at has an electronic component. To encourage the growth, what India has done again is given an incentive. This incentive is 25% on the capital expenditure on plant and machinery, equipment or utilities and technology, including research and development, on a reimbursement basis. So that's the incentive. So if you set up, and what is the target segment? Electronic components, semiconductor, display fabrication units, ATPM, ATMP, specialized sub-assemblies, capital goods for manufacture of wholesale goods, electronic product, again, a mobile and consumer good, these are excluded. Logically, these are excluded mobiles, because mobile is covered in the other incentives, because one industry cannot be given that much of incentives in, again, multiple incentives. These are all India related, that means the federal incentives. where the government of India would give these incentives, which I covered under production linked, and this scheme of manufacturing electronic components. And who are eligible and what is eligible for this incentive? If you have plant and machinery, equipment, utilities and technology. So this would be the eligibility, and based on this, there would be a 25% on capital expenditure. What is the tenure? The applications are open for 3 years. It had started in April 2020. 3 years is the time of filing of the application, and all the capex and investments made within the 5 years from the date of acknowledgement of meeting the eligible criteria, you will keep getting the incentives. India has allocated approximately $0.44 billion as incentives for the purposes of this industry. Interestingly, we have another incentive. Again, this is by the electronic manufacturing cluster. This is scheme 2.0. Earlier scheme was there in India, and India moved on to another scheme, which is now up and about and running currently. So this is an incentive which is given for more of the land and building. So it's a financial incentive of 50% of the project cost per 100 acres of land, up to INR 0.7 billion, which is approximately US 10 million. Minimum investment of US dollar 40 million, with an upward with increase in purchase of at least 20% of the total land. So this incentive is for, again, the target segment is electronic products. This is applicable to both new and old. What it's saying is that, again, it's open for 3 years, starting from April 2020, with all the capex within the 5 years from the date when it is acknowledgement of the meeting of all the criteria is done. Again, once you put the infrastructure in place, the capital expenditure in place, the government will give the incentive of 50% of the project cost. So when you're putting up a project in India, the cost partially is taken care by the government. That's where the incentives are coming in. Now, there is a huge list of investment which are given. I just to pause here a little bit. India is a huge country, and like the system, we have the federal system, which is the India as the central government, and then we have around 28 states, which are smaller jurisdiction, and each state also has incentives. So when we look up and somebody wants to come into India, so India would mean that first India as a jurisdiction as a whole, and then which state would you want to go down and set up your industry in. One of the 28 states, whichever is, there would be a reason why one would choose the state. It's not only India which is trying to get the investment, each of the state have their own budgets as well. They would also give certain fiscal incentives, and they would welcome companies to set up, because if they set up in their state, then again, as I mentioned, there will be a collateral benefit in that whole area, whether it's by way of employment, by the way of growth or infrastructure. So there are incentives which are, you may not have heard of the states, but it's important to know that there are states called Maharashtra, Haryana, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. What would also affect would be a business decision as to which state would like to go. One is the incentives. Second is possibly where your main business partner has set up an office or a manufacturing unit. So if, for example, if Samsung has set up a manufacturing unit in a state like a Tamil Nadu, I'm just giving the name of the state, which has actually done that. So one, you'll get an incentive, and secondly, if you're going to be supplying to that particular company, then as a vendor, as a preferred vendor, you would have the benefit of being close to them. The other decision could be how, if you would like to be more into the export part of it. So would you want to have a proximity to the seas and the port? Then there could be some states which have the advantage of being on the sea, on the port, and immediately when you manufacture, your goods are transferred by rail to the port and shipped out. So these are various benefits that one would choose. But to repeat, that each of the states would also have incentives which would be built in, which we have not covered in detail because it could be from state to state. Incentives could include stamp duty exemption, interest subsidy, subsidy infrastructure incentives. So that's where how we would have these incentives. I'll give you an example about when I mentioned about the industries which are being set up in India. So there are industries which I am aware of, as I mentioned about Foxconn or Ringstar or Winstron. These are some Taiwanese companies. We are also aware of a company called Delta. Delta is a very huge company which is a component manufacturer in Taiwan. So they have set up their office and business in India for the last couple of years. And we know the growth story that there must be something which Taiwan, with these companies like Foxconn or even Delta, because we are closely, we have some sort of assignment, so I'm aware that these companies would see something in India, something in the state. Once the decision is taken, then once this entity comes in, so if when we said that if Apple sets in or Delta sets up a business in that jurisdiction, the vendors would also come in and benefit from their setting up in India. So both ways, it's a win-win for a company to set up. And the first step has already been taken by the big father, whether we say the Samsung father or we say the Foxconn father for Apple. And the other vendors will follow their father, I would say, or the baby steps, because that's how we will build the ecosystem. So that's why this Tamil Nadu, for example, is a state which has welcomed many of these. When I know that we've discussed about whether they welcome Samsung or Delta or I was using Apple also. So these are the entities or companies which have taken decisions to step into India, looked at all the incentives, looked at incentives given by the government, looked at business as a whole, and to see whether it makes profit for them to come in, set up where the labor is cheap, where the incentives are given by the government, and where there is a possibility of expansion in future, because when the market is huge, the time is to rise. And if you rise the market, that's where we would do. So I think in short, I've tried to cover in the given allocated time of 45 minutes to really touch upon all the issues, but I'll hand over the forum back to you, Stephen. So to understand if there is any question or anything else that you need me to address to.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to have this session, and I really have a lot of very valuable information that thanks Mr. Puri to provide us such valuable information and share with this very insightful knowledges. And I have to say, after your presentation, I finally know maybe the audience also have the same idea that there's a lot of booming sectors right now in India, not only the electronics, but also in consumer markets. You are the biggest, you are going to be the biggest booming market in very many industries. And also you are very quick to adapt to new technologies like electronic vehicles. That's a really quick advance. I have to say it's a quick hand. And also at last, we know your government, not only national stage, but also on at the state, at a local stage. You also provide a lot of benefits, a lot of incentives. And I have to say, a lot of incentives needs local professionals to help the foreign investors to apply. So that's a reason what we hold this event to introduce where is the incentives and how we can help each other on that. And for more contact, just I have said that this event will be recorded in later and put on the YouTube, and we will provide the contact by each side. And also, thanks Sachin, you also provide us in the future doing business in India, especially in Chinese. That is a really great favor. Yeah, and I will also put in the contact and the information below the YouTube. Yeah, maybe later. So that is a great share with this information. Yeah, and for this Q&A sessions, there's an audience that would like to have a question. Simon, yeah, I think you have a question about doing business in India. Could you share with us your question?
Hello?
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Puri, for your presentation. I see there's lots of opportunity to invest to India.
I'm sorry, this is an echo. Maybe you can express your question. Please. And close your microphone. This is an echo, and we are solving this problem.
You're on mute.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Very well.
All right, thank you, Puri, for your presentation. I see a lot of opportunity to invest in India. And my question is that after COP27, so a lot of environmental new policies are brought onto the tables. I'm wondering, from your point of view, would this in fact like the future policy in India? And as a Taiwanese investors or companies, how should these investors to consider this problem, this issue? Thank you.
Excellent question. The COP26, which was held in Glasgow, our country also participated, and the climate change is the biggest worry for everywhere in the world, we understand. And India, just for a statistics purposes, if I recollect, has got approximately, our electricity that we generate is approximately 50% from coal. And coal and thermal is not the area where we would want to go. So coal, and I believe the Prime Minister has committed by 2070, which is a long way, but to have a zero net carbon credit, carbon emission. But how we are going to do that, if you remember, when I looked at and gave you the presentation of my slide for renewable energy, in that renewable energy, I mentioned that is a booming sector, and India has presently got only 100 gigawatts, and we are looking at 1,000 gigawatts of renewable energy, because we are abiding by the COP26 as well as the climate change. That's why renewable energy is the booming sector. If you're looking at 1,000 gigawatts, that's where the shift is going to be, when we will have solar energy, we'll have wind energy. And solar energy, India in any case is looking at, and that's why I know that Taiwanese companies are also looking at the various solar panels, which are presently with the Chinese have a dominance, but I think India is open to the market. And with this, from 100 to 1,000 gigawatts, I'm sure we will be able to get a zero emission in 2070, as committed by our Honorable Prime Minister.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and I also have one question that is could be connected with this one. Yeah, and a student of mine have mentioned there is some the problem of pollution right now in your capital city. So Taiwan has suffered the same problem decades ago, but right now it could be a little hazardous and also discouraging for the foreign investors to long staying in your capital city. Is that situation will be improved in near future?
Okay. I cannot comment on the government, but I'll give you very interesting statistics. When you look at Taiwan as a country, it's an island which has got a population. India, as I said, has approximately 3.2 million square meters of area of land. And our land, as I said, they've got around 28 states and a population of 1.4 billion. It's a huge country. So when we look at India, we don't look at my capital city, which is, I know, unfortunately, we are living in one of the most polluted cities in the world. But when a person like you or an investor comes to India, New Delhi is a capital where you would be sitting because you will have only your corporate office in India. New Delhi does not permit any industry to be open in India. That's why anybody who sets up an office or a manufacturing unit will have to set up in another state. That's why Tamil Nadu or like a Delta, where I mentioned, have set up somewhere in Chennai. They would have set it up in another state, which is next to the sea, and the sea takes away the pollution, and that's where it is. But in Delhi, to answer your question, for people like us and Sachin who are sitting in Delhi, we would like to have a better, less polluted city, for which the government is encouraging electronic vehicles. There is a policy where not more than 10 years of diesel vehicle is permitted to be running in the capital, not more than 15 of the petrol. So these are small steps which are being taken. But to answer your question both ways, Delhi should improve. We would like to have a better quality, but anybody coming to India would not mean that you're going to be coming only to New Delhi. You will set up a business office in India, and your people will have a manufacturing hub somewhere in one of the states, which would be definitely much better than any of the places. I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Puri. That is really relaxing news for us that we don't stay always in the worst environment, but already the Taiwanese businessmen already find ways. So maybe we can copy the same thing in the future. And also, I got another question from the website that it's about a project office. Yeah, in your PPT, in your presentation, you talk about that the Taiwanese or the foreign investor can set up a project office in India to perform the contract. And you also say that project office can last more than 6 months, even 1 year. But as far as I know, that could result in a permanent establishment. Yeah, according to the OECD convention, treaty convention, that could result into a permanent establishment. The friends in the website want to know, is there any option that could prevent this PE status, or it's just PE and you have to perform your tax obligation accordingly?
Okay, a good question. Whoever wants to do business in India and wants to step into the Indian jurisdiction will have to live with the idea of the permanent establishment or the taxation, because taxation follows the setup in India. The only exception, so let me just tell you, project office is a word which is coined under the foreign regulations in India. It's an office which is permitted to be set up. So when I use the word project office, I will use it vis-a-vis the federal regulations of India. When I use the word permanent establishment, which is OECD and Income Tax Act also understands, it is vis-a-vis the income tax. Anybody who sets an office in India and does business in India would be subject to tax like a permanent establishment, until and unless it does only for a 1 month or a 2 months period. If it is given in our double taxation agreement, which says that if you set up an office in India which is less than 6 months or the time period in our treaty, then it will not be treated as carrying on business and will be only for a period of time. But if it is more than that, you'll have to follow the rules and regulations and pay income tax in India, but surely get credit in Taiwan for the double tax if there is.
Okay, so that's great to know that we have the same rules and the same regulations about the PE, and the project office could if lasts more than 6 months could result into a PE. So that it's great to know the rules are the same. Yeah, and let me ask my students whether they have further questions. Yeah, anyone have further questions? No, yeah, and I think it's already time, and it's really great to have your this wonderful insight. And last, we Taiwanese, we know that we have a different perspective about the cooperative future between Taiwan and India. And I believe it's just a start. Yeah, and we would like to have further webinars on different topics. And I am very looking forward to our further sessions on different topics. Maybe next time we can further look into a very specific industry, and maybe into a specific rule of taxation. Yeah, because next time a lot of we Taiwanese care much about taxation, especially and also how you deal with the global tax reform. That is another topic very hard in Taiwan. So we could discuss a lot and exchange our ideas.
Thank you. I must thank Sachin and Stefan, both to you, because this is something which is really nice, and we have connected digitally, electronically, sitting so far apart, but feeling that if this exchange of knowledge and information continues like this, all of us are going to be learning new things and how we can collaborate and see the world in a different manner. Sachin, your thoughts?
No, I think that's absolutely very well put, Vidur. And Stephen, once again, thank you very much for putting all this together. And as you said, this is just a start of the collaboration between us, which would extend to many, many other webinars where we will discuss other aspects of investing into India. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Puri and my friend Sachin. And I'm looking forward for the next webinar and further topics we can discuss later. And also we will put our this wonderful discussion in the YouTube and also in podcast. And hope that will bring some change to our relationships, especially business cooperative relationships.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. See you
Bye-bye.
next time. See you next time.